Guys, today a full Jiyan theory crafting guide where I talk about his kit, best teammates, best builds, and so on. Let's go. First of all, Jiyan's main and only role is that of a main DPS. He's an aero character and pretty much the entirety of his kit revolves on dealing damage. However, in that sense, not all of his abilities matter because he's the type of character that really focuses on his ultimate or Resonance Liberation to achieve his offensive ceiling. In fact, while his basic attacks are a flashy combination of hits, they just pale in comparison to what he can do during his Resonance Liberation. The basic attacks are mostly useful in the overworld, where the downtime is different than what's in optimal rotations. So let's check the actual bread and butter of his kit, the Resonance skill and Liberation. His skill is pretty basic, it's just a sword launch that makes him dash forward and deal damage in a single instance. It can be used both on foot and in the air, which is why it's a pretty useful tool for exploration, and for combat, the reason it's good is that it deals nice damage while making you recover plenty of energy and having low cooldowns. So it's something that you'll find yourself using multiple times in a single rotation. The skill has two variants, the first is the basic one and the other is when you have a full Forte bar field. The second deals more damage, so by the looks of it you should always use that, but that's actually not the case. That's because the Forte bar is more useful when consumed for the Resonance Liberation, but let's go step by step. The Resonance Liberation, as I implied earlier, changes how his basic attacks work. As opposed to feeling like you're just tickling the enemy, during the Liberation you will summon a literal dragon with every sword slash. Not only to make you deal way more damage than normal, but it will also cause absolute destruction in AoE scenarios. In fact, his basic attacks will now cover a wide range all around Jiyan, which makes him great at dealing with groups of opponents. Also, the dragon he summons will also capture the small opponents it hits and push them towards the trajectory of the hit. It doesn't work against big opponents, but it's still very useful because it gives Jiyan a de facto grouping effect that will ensure that all the opponents he's facing will stay in his range during his attacks. Other than this, there are two useful effects that come with his Liberation. First, he gains resistance to staggering, which means he can be thrown away by opponents' attacks. This is important because it allows him to maximize his combos in more scenarios. Second, each of his attacks during the Liberation becomes an 8-hit chain, meaning that each attack will hit an opponent 8 times, and this is very important because each of these hits has a chance of parrying the opponent's attack. Normally, when you want to parry a hit, you have to hit the opponent at a very specific time, but this is not true with Jiyan. Basically, each of his attacks has so many hits that even if you don't time it, you will counter most of the parryable attacks. Overall, he is built to be able to relentlessly hit opponents with no care whatsoever. Now, as I mentioned earlier, his Liberation has synergy with the Forte bar. In fact, if you use the Liberation when the Forte bar is filled, you will instantly launch a strong AoE attack. Also, during the Liberation, you will enter the Qilong mode. During this mode, the Resonance skill gets the damage increase it will get from the Forte bar, but without actually consuming it. And that's the reason it's not worth it to consume Forte for the skill before the Liberation, because you'll get those effects during the Liberation anyway. But how do we get Forte reliably with Jiyan? Simple, his intro skill. The intro will make him plunge towards an opponent as he enters the field and will instantly fuel a Forte bar of his. Additionally, it will increase his attack by 10% for 15 seconds, so it's a must to always use it when you start a rotation with Jiyan. And just to show you what a Jiyan rotation will look like, you start with the intro skill, then you do the echo attack, then the Resonance Liberation, then the Resonance skill, then basic attacks, and then Resonance skill by the end of the Liberation duration. After that, you go out with this Atro skill that will deal some damage, and you cycle with your supports again. Pretty simple, very easy character to play honestly. In terms of leveling his Forte, you should of course prioritize the Resonance Liberation, because that's where most of his damage comes from. The normal attacks during it don't scale off the basic attack talent, but the Resonance Liberation talent, so don't make the mistake to level up the basic attack talent. For the rest, all of the Resonance skill, the Forte circuit, the intro skill are nice to level up, but they deal infinitely more damage than the Resonance Liberation, so prioritize that and then do the rest. Let me remind you to sub to my channel if you enjoy my content, because it really makes me notice your support. Now, talking about echo builds, as an aero DPS, Jiyan mainly has two options. The first is the Sierra Gale set, which gives aero damage bonus, and the second is the Lingering Tune set, which gives attack percent. The aero set is better in terms of damage for Jiyan, but the attack set is a more general option that will work on many units, so maybe it's better in terms of farming efficiency, but if you want to prioritize Jiyan's damage specifically, then definitely go for the aero set. If you can't make make a full set of either one, then combinations of the two also work. For the rest, when talking about echo sets, it's also important to talk about the main echo, so the active echo you can use in combat. For the arrow set, the best option would be the Philion Beringo, so the big white ape. That's because on top of dealing nice damage, the ape will also give the holder of the echo a 12% arrow and heavy damage bonus. Since most of Jiyan's liberation damage is heavy damage, this is quite substantial for him. However, the issue here is that the ape is quite slow and does 2 hits in total, and will only give the buff after the second hit connects. So if you do it normally and wait for the echo to complete his attack, it will just slow you down. But what you can do is swap cancelling it by switching to another character. Basically, if you swap mid animation, the ape will still finalize the attack and give Jiyan the buffs. So it's a good way to play around the fact that it's pretty slow. But there is a second issue here. If Jiyan currently has buffs that get removed if he swaps out, like for example Mortefi's auto skill effects, he will lose them if he swap cancels that way. So for this specific example, you want to adapt the rotation in a way you do the full swap cancelling thing before you activate the buffs from Mortefi. Meanwhile, the lingering tune set, while weaker, is much easier to use. That's because its main echo, the Mech Abomination, will give you 12% attack for basically 0 animation time. It's the type of echo that when you use him you won't turn into him, so basically you just cast him, get attack buff, and then proceed with the rest of the rotation with Jiyan. So I would say both are good, honestly. Both are good options. For the offensive stats, the debate is mostly between attack percent and arrow damage bonus. Specifically for the 3-cost echo main stats that can have arrow percent or attack percent, they're actually pretty close. For most scenarios, arrow damage is just better, but there are some specific cases where attack percent gets really close or even surpasses it. For example, if you use his signature weapon that gives a lot of damage bonus, then attack can be slightly better. Honestly, it's a case-by-case thing that really depends on your builds, so if you have questions regarding your build specifically, ask them below and I'll try to answer as many as I can. For other stats, for example the 4-cost echo, Jiyan likes crit rate in pretty much every scenario, excluding when you have a crit rate weapon. That's because in this game we really get a lot of crit damage and not much crit rate, and even though Jiyan gets some from his traces, that's not nearly enough. So unless you have a crit rate weapon, go for a crit rate main stat. The full build will be a 4-cost crit echo, 2 3-cost arrow damage echoes, although one of them can be attack percent, and then 2 1-cost attack percent echoes. Meanwhile, for these substats you need to keep in mind that Jiyan will need around 30 to 40% energy regeneration to be able to use his resonance liberation on cooldown every time. So unless you want to use a 3-cost energy regeneration echo or have an energy regeneration weapon, you'll need to get those stats from the substats. In most cases, 4 energy regeneration rolls should be enough, then you go for crit rolls, then you go for attack percent rolls, and then heavy damage percent rolls. So that's it for the echo builds. Now let's talk weapon builds. In this regard, Jiyan has a peculiarity, and that is that his signature weapon is really fucking strong. It's just by far the best option he has, and nothing even begins to compare. It comes with a very big crit damage secondary stat and also massive damage bonuses that are very easy to achieve for him. It also doesn't help that the other 5-star option, so the standard 5-star weapon, doesn't have great synergy with Jiyan, honestly. While it gives attack percent and energy regeneration that are useful, its buff to resonance liberation damage is not that great. That's because only the initial 40 hit from Jiyan's resonance liberation is considered resonance liberation damage. The following normal attack hits are considered heavy damage, so this weapon doesn't buff them. Besides this, Autumn Trace, the Pioneer podcast weapon, is pretty good as it comes with a crit rate secondary stat. Broadblade is a craftable weapon and also the best free-to-play one as it comes with attack percent and also energy regeneration. But its effects are tied to you having over 80% HP, so it might be hit or miss. Other than this, some 3-star weapons are usable but mostly cope. Now, regarding his best teammates, I won't show you every rotation because I haven't leveled up every character yet, but I calculated the potential synergies with some specific characters to find the best partners for Jiyan, so let's see it. When it comes to buffing, nobody beats Mortefi because through his auto skill he will give Jiyan a full 38% heavy damage deepen. As a reminder, damage deepen is different from damage bonus because it's a full other multiplier and so it's more valuable. Irina is the second best buffer because she provides damage deepen and attack percent buffs for the full team. And that makes her pretty unique in this list of characters because she's the only one here that provides team-wide buffs. So even though Alto technically gives higher buffs compared to Irina, is worse because it can be paired with Mortefi. That's because just like Mortefi, Alto has an auto skill that gives damage deepen to the next character until he switches out. So for example, you can do something like Alto's auto skill to Jiyan and then you go to Mortefi to use the auto skill to Jiyan again because that way you lose Alto's auto skill effects. Meanwhile, Virina perfectly pairs with either of them, and that's what makes her so good. Then other options will be Baiji, that also gives damage deepen through her outro skill. Yang gives energy through her outro skill, which is nice if you need it. Meanwhile, Jiyan is mostly here for defensive utility. And truth be told, damage is not the full picture, because defensive utility also plays a big part, because you have Jiyan that provides defensive utility, Virina and Baiji that can heal your character, so they definitely have value that way. Similarly, since both Yang and Jiyan can group opponents through the Resonance Liberation, they can have a lot of value in that sense. Additionally, since characters like Mortefi deal a lot of damage themselves, their value can't be estimated just by how much they buff Jiyan. So this is something useful, but not the full picture. Currently I'm playing Jiyan with Mortefi and Virina, which is probably his best team in terms of damage. The way I play it, I bring both Virina and Mortefi close to having the outro skill ready, then I outro with Virina to Jiyan, then I use the Ape Echo with Jiyan and swap Cancellate to Mortefi, then with Mortefi Resonance Liberation, outro skill to Jiyan again, and rest of the combo. In terms of damage, this should be the best possible rotation of this team. You should also worry about which echo sets the other characters have, because there are pretty good supportive sets in the game. For example, Virina can hold the Glow set that will give the whole team a 15% attack bonus when she heals any character. With this set, you use the Geochelon active echo that when used will give the whole team a 10% damage bonus and a 50% damage reduction. With Mortefi, you use the Cloud set and the Heron main echo that will both give the next active character you switch to with an outro skill and an attack percent bonus. So there is a lot of damage optimization you can do. Just to quickly address his sequences, each one excluding the first one ranges from pretty great to amazing, especially the third, fifth and sixth one. I don't plan to pull for sequences so early, but if you do, then this should be useful for you. And I'm done for today. If you enjoyed this video, remember to subscribe and bye bye.